Good evening. Today is May 25th, 2022. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, and you're watching The Pipeline. Thank you all for joining us. I'm joined, as usual, by the always dapper Dave Naylor, Western Standard News editor. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Like these chairs. Who doesn't like these chairs is Western Standard opinion and broadcast editor Cory Morgan. He has to sit up straight now on his daily show, don't you?
Yes, it ruins my slouch, but it helps me get that crabbiness up that I help to share with everybody
He's
daily.
extra pissed off.
Yes,
that he has to sit up straight now. We got an interesting show. Jason Kenney's long goodbye. Jason Kenney is gone, as you know. A week ago today, Jason Kenney resigned announced he will resign, and it's going on a lot longer than was expected. We're gonna talk about what led to his resignation, obviously, in that leadership review, and the long, drawn-out process that now seems to be coming for his long goodbye. But now that Kenney is gone, who comes next? The leadership race for the United Conservative Party of Alberta is already heating up. In fact, it began about it. Actually, I don't know if it ever ended with Brian Jean. I think just the 2017 campaign just continued on through. But the race is heating up with candidates, several candidates having already launched campaigns and other campaigns in the works. And we've got a lot of the scuttlebutt on that. And Tamara Lich, Freedom Convoy organizer, she is out of jail, staying out of jail for now. The Crown's not very happy about that. Government's very upset. We're going to talk about the case that was just settled on that around bail and keeping her out of jail. Before we dive in, though, I'm going to thank all of our Western Standard members for your continued support. With your support, we've been able to massively grow the Western Standard over the last year. We are now one of the largest news organizations in Western Canada, and we're going to continue to grow, reinvesting the revenue we're able to bring in from membership dues back into providing high-quality, original Western and independent comment. If you want unlimited access to the Western Standard, it's only $10 a month or $99 a year. You can find us at westernstandard.news and click on membership. You get unlimited access to independent, government bailout-free Western media. Okay. Oh, and of course, we have to thank one of our wonderful sponsors, Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well is one of the original and founding sponsors of the Western Standard. Bitcoin Well is an Alberta-based company, but with operations right across Western Canada, helping to make Bitcoin easy and accessible to regular people. They've got Bitcoin ATMs spread right across the West. Do they have some in Ontario too now?
Yeah, I believe the map shows them all across the country, actually.
It's unfortunate they're out there. Okay. We're out there too now.
Yeah, when you're traveling, you can have access.
There are some good Ontarians.
To service Westerners when they're having to do business in the East.
Yeah. But they've got Bitcoin ATMs set up all over, very easy and accessible. If you're a small business owner, you should consider doing what we've done at the Western Standard and paying a small portion of what you pay your employees in Bitcoin. That's what we do here as an important hedge against the deflating Canadian federal dollar. Okay, let's get into it. Kenney's long goodbye. A week ago, we sat in this room and watched as the vote came in, 51.4% roughly or so. Clearly not enough for any leader to stay on leading a political party. Jason Kenney resigns. That's what we thought.
But hasn't really happened.
Everything before the but is bullshit.
Everything for the but. Well, I mean, yeah, it was exactly 1 week ago tonight. And we all thought he was going to stay on because he'd repeatedly said, including to our Rachel Emmanuel in an exclusive interview the day before the vote, that he was going to stay at anything above 50% plus one. I mean, we all said it was going to be disastrous and tear the party apart, but he repeatedly said he was going to stay. So when he came on and announced he was resigning, it was quite a shock. And we certainly had to scramble that night. But everybody thought, okay, that was it. Maybe he'll go to the Ledge, McDougall Center, clean out his desks, and the common sense seemed to be appoint an acting premier, much like they did with Dave Hancock when he was appointed.
That's the one who followed between Ellis and Redford.
Yes.
Apprentice,
but he...
just because I'm pretty sure almost no one knows who that is.
Dave Hancock?
Yeah, even though he was premier.
But he's got a big portrait in the Premier's gallery.
He's on the wall, but I don't think I'll bet you a beer that if when we go out and watch the game, no one is going to be able to tell us who Dave Hancock is.
All right. Sad, really. But rumbling started right away that Kenney was not going to leave immediately. And he confirmed it at the caucus meeting the next day at McDougall Center, Thursday morning, that he was going to stay on as premier until his successor is picked. And that would be up to the UCP party to decide when and where. So he could be premier for several more months. I've got a personal opinion on it. I told Cory about it earlier this week. He was raised in a Jesuit school, very religious man. I think he wants to be the Pope he wants to be the premier when the Pope touches down in Edmonton in July. He wants to be the first one in line on the tarmac when the Pope descends from his El Italia jet and kisses the ground. When he gets up, I think Jason Kenney wants to be that first guy. So I think that's the reason he's staying.
I hadn't considered that angle. Maybe that I think at the least that probably plays into it at least a bit. I think the reason he wants to stick around primarily is to try and shape his legacy. If you leave right away, well, you're kind of Alison Redforded out the door. Your story's over, and that's how it ends. Having a few more months as premier, I think, allows him to do a couple of popular things and try to rewrite history a bit, so that, with the benefit of hindsight, he hopes that we'll look back and say, it wasn't so bad. He did these things. Cory, why do you think it is Kenney? Why do you think Kenney wants to hang on? Why didn't he just say, screw you guys, I'm going home? First they said, oh my God, they killed Kenney. And then, screw you guys, I'm going home. Why didn't he just pack up and leave if the party needs to move on?
I think it's part of what you both said, actually. They tie together, sort of. That's one more positive thing to end on. There's the imagery of meeting the Pope, which is a big deal to a person who's an observant Catholic, and it stands out, and it's a part of the legacy. A papal visit to Alberta is pretty rare a thing to be a part of, so he's not cutting the ribbon at a Commonwealth Games again or something, but there was something unique that he was in for. And perhaps a couple of policy initiatives to come in, because he obviously didn't want to go. So let's hang on and see if we can't build a little bit of a legacy on the way out, and a few things, as you said, people can look back on and say, well, this happened during his term, rather than the very final action and everything remembers was him being kicked out by his own party.
The downside to it is it gives the NDP several more months of shooting A at him and B, a leaderless UCP.
It's hard. It's not unprecedented for a leader to stay on until the replacement is selected either.
It's actually the more common
interim
way.
But in the case when it was, an unwilling ejection almost, it is a little more unusual to stay in. But it's not out of the unexpected either. We just didn't expect that this. We never really thought of it. We thought he's either going to be in or out, not this kind of in between.
Well, he's kind of in this lame duck phase now, but arguably, like lame duck presidents, in between, losing an election or being replaced if they're termed out and the new guy coming in, they don't have a lot of political capital. But at the same time, they sometimes do get interesting things done, because what's anyone going to do about it?
Nothing to lose.
You got nothing to lose. Maybe you'll do some of the more controversial and interesting things. Like there was talk that Donald Trump would pardon Edward Snowden or something. Obviously, he didn't do that. But, really controversial things on the way out. What do you guys? We'll begin with you, Dave, then I'll go to you, Cory. What do you expect from him, other than kissing the Pope's ring? What do you expect from a Premier Kenney for the remaining, probably 3-4 months he's got?
I think it'll just be the economy. He'll be crowing about how well Alberta's getting investments into it. Companies are coming here, and I think he'll spend the next 3 or 4 months just trying to firm up more deals and work on pipelines. We got the lingering energy crisis now. I'm sure he's going to work on that and try and get some pipeline action into the States. So I think he's going to try and leave Alberta in a better state than he found it, maybe, in terms of finances anyways, and business.
I think he's upset. He's hurt, I guess you could say, but I don't think he's going to be embittered. The other fear is a scorched earth thing, well, you know what, I'm just going to lay some poison pills or leave a grumpy in the Premier's desk for whoever the next person is coming in there.
Only you would think of that.
That's very Amber Heardish of you.
Well, some people do things when relationships split. But, He's it's the end of a long political career. I think he might come up with something like that we're not thinking of. I mean, you want something that you can point at, like, that was mine, not just a city park or a small item. There may be some sort of legacy, but it's going to be hard because the legislature's closing up, it looks like, in the next week too. So, I mean, outright legislation, it'd be difficult to pass.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about what this means for the party. UCP members, at least half of them officially here, said it's time to go. In the name of God, go. The other half, I don't think, relatively unenthusiastically said he can stay. But I think the message is pretty clear. It's time for new leadership. Jason Kenney, in his departure speech, said that it's time to put the past behind us. It's time to move on. He was saying the whole thing in the lead up to the vote, hoping people would forget about his actions over the last 2 years. But now it's time to move on from the divisiveness of Jason Kenney here. But he's still there. And at least two of the candidates who are running already, Brian Jean and Danielle Smith, both of them are fairly critical, I think it's fair to say, of Jason Kenney and how he's governed and his policies. Brian Jean more critical of Kenney's style, and Danielle Smith probably more critical of Jason Kenney's policies. It's going to probably be a bit awkward having a guy that you're essentially running against still leading the party that you're hoping to lead. It's going to make for an awkward. It's going to kind of stink up the room. How difficult do you think this is going to be, or how awkward do you think it's going to be for the party to be able to move on quickly and choose new leadership while Kenney's still there?
Well, I think Kenney's made it extremely difficult. I think what people want to see now is somebody who's going to come forward and say, okay, I'm going to do things differently. Disassociate themselves with Jason Kenney and his policies. But how are people like, say, okay, Jason Nixon, say he's going to run? How can he then sit there while the premier is still the premier and say, well, I disagree completely with what you've done. I'm going to do things differently, while he was a member of the inner circle too, right? So he's got that going for him.
Well, that's the issue we're going to see with Travis Taves. So yes. What we're seeing right now, and we're going to have some reporting on this, is Travis Taves is very quickly becoming the Kenney candidate. The people around the premier's office, a lot of people in the cabinet, kind of the Kenney establishment of that party, they're very quickly rallying around Travis Taves as the kind of continuation. You'll probably have a few token breaks from the past, but there is going to be at least one Kenney torchbearer of Kenney's legacy in this race.
But is that something Travis would want? Right? I mean, I would think the average UCP member wants Kenney and his entire office gone.
Half the party voted for him. I suspect that half were were much less enthusiastic about keeping him than the other side were about getting rid of him. But half that party voted for Jason Kenney. And how much do you need to win? 50% plus one. And so I think there is a path to victory for a candidate who, at the very least, is uncritical of the last 3 years and the legacy of Kenney as premier.
There is, but I would argue that we're less than a year away from an election now. They don't have time to reinvent themselves as Kenney light. They need to be something as Kenney different. And Travis Taves, I would think his best bet is to distance himself from Kenney, because then there's 51% of people who say, well, it's just going to be another Kenney. The same 51% of people who voted to oust him. So again, he's hobbled candidates by staying around, because, like it or not, there is a stink to Jason Kenney right now. And I think he should have removed himself quickly and cleared the decks and have let the party just, fight it out and have a good open contest.
Cory, what do you think this means for the ability of the party to be able to move on to a new leader and kind of a new era in this party's history while he's sticking around? Is this going to be a big problem? And how much do you think this is going to affect the dynamics of the leadership race, as we're just talking about here?
I don't think it's going to handicap it as much as some might think. As I said, the session's ending, so Kenney is now going to be a lame duck figurehead traveling around, still technically the premier, but not really, aside from orders in council and some other things, doing much. But at the same time, too, even if you'll have to be careful. There's no sense shooting at the lame duck. He's on the way out. He's been rejected. And as was pointed out, nearly half of the party, at least in that vote, whether lukewarm or not, supported him. So they're not necessarily going to enjoy more attacks on him. I mean, the first task was done, at least by the Brian Jeans and the ones who just wanted him out at all costs. Now they got to say, well, okay, why am I the better replacement? I think they'd be wiser to focus their campaigns on, yes, distinguishing themselves from the past administration. Why would I be fresh? Why would I bring in something new? But there probably won't be much sense in even bringing up Kenney at that point. I would think like he's done. So there's no sense on that. Now, why am I the one? And I think that's where Brian Jean's going to have a much harder time. He's modeled his whole being and just being the anti-Kenney. Okay, we got that done, Brian. Now, what are you representing? And they have to pivot to do that.
Well, this is the perfect pivot to the second part of what we're talking about is now that Kenney's gone, who comes next? And I suppose I wrecked my own rules in attempting to keep our comments segmented here and kind of getting into Travis Taves. But we're going to talk now about what comes next, this leadership race. So maybe we'll come back to Travis Taves in a few minutes, but let's, I divided up into 4 categories. You got Jean, you got Smith, you got Taves, and others. I think there'll be some smaller candidates, some people who run just to get their name out. There'll be some smaller ones on the right pushing particular issues and whatnot. But we'll kind of deal with the 3 big ones and then kind of a free-for-all round for the smaller other maybes. So let's begin with Brian Jean. He played at least a significant role in pushing out Kenney. I think not as big as I think a lot of the mainstream media, because they don't understand internal Conservative Party dynamics, Conservative movement dynamics. I don't think they really get what proportions are correct or not. But he did play a significant role in pushing Kenney out. Cory, what is the game plan for Jean now? If you're advising Brian Jean, what are you telling him he needs to do between now and, let's hypothetically say the vote is October 1st. Between now and October 1st, if we're going to pick a date, what does he need to do coming out of the gate here to brand himself as more than just the guy, the candidate designed to just get rid of Kenney because Kenney's gone?
He's got to reintroduce himself to Albertans. I mean, the next role now is also to convince the members, I'm going to not just vote for me, but vote for me because I'm the one who can beat Notley next year. And Jean, again, everybody remembers that disastrous debate between Jean and Notley, and there were other factors as to why that performance was as it was or whatnot. So he has to convince people, well, that's not the performance I would bring about in another election. When I get one more kick at the cat, I'm going to present something different. I'm going to strengthen this party. I can actually win and keep the UCP in power. And that's a different thing than a negative thing. He's got to now campaign about himself and being positive. And what is he going to bring then? How can he beat Notley? A lot of it now, if you're turning the guns, you got to turn them at Notley. So he's got to rebrand himself. Albertans still don't really know him all that well necessarily. And this will be his opportunity where he's going to have to do that.
I'd say out of the 3 candidates, Jean is probably the most well-known, followed very closely by Danielle Smith. I don't think many people know who Travis Taves is outside of 100 yards of the legislature. But if you quit the Western Standard today and tomorrow you're in Brian Jean headquarters, what are you telling Brian he needs to do on his campaign?
Just get policies out there and explain to people he's not going to quit. Every job he's had, he's ended up quitting early. So he's got that reputation. I think people just want to hear policies and ideas. That's what any leadership race is about. And as Cory says, how is he going to beat Notley? Right? Because that's the big fear Conservatives now have, less than a year away from the convention. What distinct policies can you put up that will stop people voting NDP?
I don't know. I think a lot of people, party members in a leadership race, are looking for policy, but I think a lot of them they're looking for winnability. That's a huge one. There's a lot of intangibles they're looking for. And remember, parties are tribes, and Conservative parties, particularly Alberta Conservative parties, are tribes of tribes, and there are clear tribes within the United Conservative Party. And it is fascinating that we're going to have 2 former leaders of one of those tribes facing off here. Danielle Smith, at least early on in her career, was a very capable leader of the Wild Rose. Obviously, it ended pretty disastrously. She's back. She had a very short run here at the Western Standard.
Very short.
But
I think she needs to continue her apology tour. When she announced her candidacy one of the first things she did was admit she was wrong, crossing the floor. You remember your anger as an MLA at the time, and she
I wasn't gonna. It's what made me
what
quit my
made
job
you?
and become
Okay,
an MLA.
yes. But I mean, there was a lot of anger. I know it was on Cory's side too. But she has manned up, so to speak, and has apologized and says she's learned from it. So now she's got to convince Albertans of that.
So we're going to get to Travis Taves in a second, but just for the sake of this argument, say Travis Taves is in, and he's more or less running, at least as not the anti-Kenney candidate. He's quietly, essentially, the Kenney candidate. He probably won't go around doing photo ops with Kenney. That probably would be a bit too far. But let's say for the sake of argument, he's running more or less as the Kenney legacy candidate. You've got Jean on the other side, who brands himself as the anti-Kenney. Do you think Smith is smart to also go as hard anti-Kenney, or try to position as maybe a bit of a bridge between the two camps, so that when you get to a final ballot, if she's on that final ballot, if it's her versus Jean, the Kenney guys, they're not going to vote for Jean, so they have to vote for her. Or if it's her versus Taves, the anti-Kenney guys aren't going to vote for Taves. Do you think that's where she's trying to position herself?
Well, I think that's where she already had kind of. She was straddling, if Kenney had won the leadership, Danielle had said clearly, even when I'd asked her, if she hadn't, if Kenney had stayed in, would you stay on as an MLA? And I do believe her that she would have stayed and bided her time, perhaps work towards cabinet.
I don't think Kenney would have let her run as an MLA, but that's a different question.
Well, that's so separate, but it's all speculative. But yeah. I do believe she was genuine with that. Whereas the longevity of, say, Brian Jean in that circumstance wasn't going to happen if Kenney was going to remain. But I mean, she was trying to not be anti-Kenney while still vying for his job. It was a balancing act. I think she kind of pulled it off. But she'll have to distinguish herself in this. And as Dave said too, that it's trust. There's that other, word. It's not policy, but it's important. Like, you got to feel like you can trust her. She's owned her mistakes. There's no doubt about that. She does all the time. I mean, the comments whenever she comes on my show, people still keep bringing it up, and they will. She has to convince people that she won't have another lapse in judgment. I mean, just because you owned it, that's fine, and that's a good sign. But also will there not be another one in the future? And if she can convince people of that, I think she can be winnable for sure.
So let's talk about Travis Taves. He is a very low-profile finance minister. I think his persona, I don't know the guy. Out of the three, he's the only one I don't really know. But his persona is very much that of the dour accountant. He's not a lot of flash. You kind of just picture him sitting in a dark room at the legislature late at night, punching an old calculator. Like, that's kind of a very almost bureaucratic or technocratic leader. People I've spoken to in the party say, "Oh, he's really conservative," and maybe he is, but just a lot of that doesn't really come through because he's not a particularly charismatic character. But what we're seeing right now is just folks around the premier, in his office, in the caucus, in the cabinet. They're coming around Travis Taves. So that is instant. Even though he's not well known, he's going to be well known very soon. That machine is going to put him up front. If you saw Question Period today, Rachel Emmanuel, our Alberta legislative reporter, she says that guess who was taking all the questions today? It was Travis Taves. Already the Premier's office is putting him up front, trying to get some more spotlight on him, trying to show him as a leader, not just to the public, but also to the caucus. So the caucus sees him as maybe an anointed successor. They could see himself in the Premier's shoes. How dangerous is it for Travis Taves to run more or less on the Kenney legacy, perhaps without calling it that, but to more or less run on the Kenney mantle?
He hasn't been tainted in the lockdown scandals as much as other cabinet ministers. He's going to, if he runs, he keeps the same low profile, scandal free, and he just watches that oil money come in and come in and come in. $100 a barrel, treasury bills. And early next year, he will bring in a budget that Albertans will have never seen in their history. And the handouts will be incredible. And the building and the investments and everything, and maybe even Travis bucks. Who knows? He's going to have so much money to spend, he won't know what to do with it. And it's going to be his call as treasurer. So he could come out of that budget wildly popular.
Well, the point I was making earlier was that I'm not sure it's terribly dangerous for him to run as the Kenney candidate. I think it is for the general election, but within the party, half the party voted back Kenney. Now, in leadership review, in a leadership race, it's not uncommon to win with 51%. In a race, in reviews, leaders that succeed normally are in the high 80s into the 90s. Rachel Notley got something like 98 or 99, numbers that Kim Jong-un would be grateful for. But he got 50%. I don't know if that 50% means that those 50% would still vote for him if it was just a race overall again. I'm doubtful of that, but there is still a significant Kenney contingent to that party. And running as like a better term, a Kenney candidate, it comes with a lot of automatic support. People around the premier, that is instant support that didn't have to be painstakingly built up over years. Do you think Travis Taves running as the more, let's say, less hostile successor to Kenney is going to be a net asset or a net negative?
I think it'll be an asset. I think potentially he's very well placed, actually. Among Kenney's inner circle, kind of as Dave was saying, I mean, we have Jason Nixon, we have Tyler Shandro. They're going down with Kenney. I mean, they were seen at the Sky Palace.
Was Travis Taves. He was on the roof.
But nobody remembers that.
No one remembers him there. He is the stealth bomber candidate.
And he's in there, and I mean, so, I mean, every one of them has got to deal with baggage in a sense when we talk about Danielle and Brian Jean, but his is indirect baggage. I mean, he's the unknown, but he's been solid. And also, if Jean and Danielle want to go at it tooth and nail with each other, Taves can sit in the middle as the quiet, steady hand, saying, well, he's got the Kenney vote, and plus, we know how these races work. If it's very personal between Jean and Danielle, say, for example, well, everybody will pick the other Taves for their second vote. And that could be the best place you could possibly be sometimes. So he's not one to be underestimated. And you know what? The appetite of the electorate might not be for flash and glitz. They want a steady hand. They want some stability. They want somebody who's level-headed. I had him on the show before, and it was kind of as described. He was solid. He was somewhat personable as far as that goes, but it was like talking to a personable accountant. But maybe that's a little what people want right now.
And he can claim he balanced the budget, right?
Well, you could claim that. I'd say Oil did that, but I mean, he played some role in that for sure. Spending is higher now than when they took over from the NDP, but they curbed the increase in spending relative to what the NDP planned to spend. But he was hardly, some great slash and burner of budgets. I think you're onto something there, Cory. We saw that kind of with Ed Stelmach. Now, I think that Travis Taves, most indications are Travis Taves is probably a bit more politically astute than Ed Stelmach, but they seem to have a similar kind of persona, slightly folksy, but quiet. Maybe dour was the wrong term for me to use, but
he was steady Eddie at first.
Steady Eddie.
Until he got in, and then he became special ed.
Yeah.
But all the same, it held some appeal for the stability and steady aspect.
And we have had nothing but political turmoil in this province for almost 20 years. I mean, when you had the leadership review with Ralph Klein getting 55%, he says, okay, time to pack it in. That's the starting gun on what became 2 decades of chaos in Alberta. You got Ed Stelmach, and everything looked fine. But then, year into Stelmach, you got the royalty review, and then boom, Wild Rose begins becoming a thing. Hinman wins that by-election. All hell breaks loose. Stelmach's gone. Redford, Prentice. Redford, Prentice. Let's see, I forgot Hancock.
See?
No one remembers Hancock. And that's why he has to write in a big signature. Then Notley, and then it has just been a constant roller coaster in politics. Maybe there is an appetite for let's just try being boring. Ontario's having an election right now, and they make less political news than Alberta. And we're a year away.
Tepid Travis.
We're going to need...
But I mean, a leadership race is where we're going to see if he comes out and into his being or not. I mean, we'll see, because he's going to have to come out of the cabinet shadows then and present himself. So we'll see how that, assuming he even runs. I mean, he hasn't.
I think among a lot of centrist voters, there might be an appetite for that kind of quiet, managerial, almost technocratic feel to government. But I think among conservative voters and especially conservative members right now, it's quite the opposite. We're seeing Pierre Poliver running the most radical federal campaign since Bernier, possibly even more so than Bernier in some respects, at least. Leaders getting toppled all over. People are in an angry, pissed off mood. Maybe they want an angry, pissed off leader.
Well, then maybe Drew Barnes will be the one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other names that could come out of the woodwork too. Leadership races are volatile things.
Yeah, and we won't even get any others right now. There is a long list. Todd
Lowen.
Yeah, well, and those two, Todd Lowen and Drew Barnes, there's a very good chance they're going to end up back in the UCP caucus now. Boy, they're going to love strutting back into there in front of Jason Kenney. I remember I did a similar strut in front of Brian Jean once. Okay, well, before we move on to, speaking of Freedom Convoy and stuff like that, we're going to move on to Tamara Lich and what's happening with her. But before we do that, Cory's going to tell you about, well, you should be a member of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association.
Because for responsible, law-abiding firearm owners, which is what the vast majority of everybody is. I mean, again, with firearms have done, I should talk about it. It's a controversial thing with the American activities. And we got to distinguish between those of us who responsibly enjoy firearms, who are law-abiding people and never want to hurt anybody. You have to protect your right to do that. You associate with other law-abiding firearm owners, and that's what they're about. It's an association of fellow firearm owners with all sorts of resources, from target shooting, trap shooting, hunting, collecting, whatever it may be. They're getting together, sharing those resources, videos, trade shows, things such as that, plus keeping you up on the news for things and lobbying to make sure you maintain that right, which is really important. They stand up for you as a firearm owner, pushing back against a liberal government that's trying to arbitrarily take away your property, your firearms. So it's important to stand up for yourself and be together and work, I guess, with a sort of solidarity, and you've got to be a member in order to do that. It's well worth it.
And their website?
CSSA-CILA.org.
Tamara Lich, probably the most prominent leader of the Freedom Convoy in Alberta. She's from Medicine Hat. She made some enemies in Ottawa. She decided to take a little trip down to Ottawa, and it's been quite a saga. The government's been trying to keep her in jail the entire time. It's quite bizarre. But there's some news on that front today, Dave. Why don't you fill us in?
She served, 2 weeks in jail when she was first arrested?
18 days. Yeah.
So since then, the judge kicked her out of Ontario.
You can knock off a liquor store and you get less than that.
Exactly. You can murder somebody and get less than that. So the judge kicked her out of the province and said, never return. And she said, yeah, I'll follow those bail conditions. Then, lo and behold, the JCCF, Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, decides to award her with the George Jonas Award, sort of Freedom Fighter of the Year. And she says, yes, I'll be glad. Thank you very much. And some Crown prosecutor in Ottawa, who's completely lost his mind, obviously, decided that was a breach of her bail conditions. And he demanded that she be thrown in jail. So last week, the Crown made his case. He was very argumentative. The judge kind of slapped him down several times. But man, did he want Tamara Lich back in jail for saying that she was going to accept this award that was going to be handed to her in Ottawa. She told us...
Toronto.
Toronto, I'm sorry. She told the Western Standard that, she would accept it via video, but she wasn't going to break her bail conditions. But that wasn't good enough for this Ottawa Crown. So that was last week. The judge came out with his ruling Wednesday morning. Finally, a judge with some common sense who basically said, look, we're not the thought police here. Justice system cannot operate like the thought police. And not only said she's not going back to jail, but he removed the conditions on not being allowed into Ontario. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure when the date of the dinner is, but I assume Tamara Lich will be down there accepting it in person.
She can if she chooses to anyways. It's a funny thing we got to watch. That's dicey. And they want to pounce on her if she violates a bail condition. So she could go, she could accept it, but she can't promote the convoy. She got to be really careful there. So if she didn't accept it,
is that condition now gone too? That she's not allowed to speak positively?
No, she's still banned from social media and all those things. So
if she gives,
if she says thank you very much and leaves,
then she
should be a problem.
But if she came out and then started anything that seemed to be promotional of more protests or the convoy, she could get into the soup. But all the same, it was a huge victory, and it was just ridiculous that they put her on the carpet for something stupid as just responding with an affirmative.
This is absolutely third world tin pot shit that we have government orders saying you're not allowed to speak positively about a protest. You're not allowed to be on social media. That the Crown would go so far as to say you're not allowed to accept an award through a video conference. I mean,
she embarrassed Trudeau. It's personal.
Yet these guys are
He's gonna
embarrassing
get her.
themselves further in these ridiculous efforts. They are.
Well, and and Canadians were so smug about how superior our justice system is to America. America's got this politicized justice system. Our judges, our crown, they're all above reproach. Now, in this case, the judge did make, I think, the appropriate decision, but you still had the crown pursuing a clearly political, even partisan agenda against a woman who was considered no great threat. People paid no attention to until she got upset with the way things were going in this country and decided to go to her nation's capital.
And don't forget about the previous Liberal appointed judge who put the bail conditions on her.
Yeah.
Right? So it's been political since the day she was arrested, without a doubt.
It was just absurd. And you know what? I'm glad to see the government being increasingly absurd. Maybe some people will wake up. I mean, if she'd been doing something ridiculous, even the social media ban, which is questionable, but fine, she stayed within it. If she'd been flagrantly disregarding it, putting up Facebook posts, pictures from the convoy, or she'd been saying, let's get ready to roll again, let's get going. Well, then you're looking to reoffend if indeed there was an offense. Then perhaps it's time to push in. But she did nothing of the sort, not even close. She tried very carefully to remain within what were ridiculously restrictive conditions as it was. So
look out, Gene Smith and Taves, Tamara Lich for UCP leader.
Whoa, never thought of
there
that.
we go. Yeah, there's no condition against running for the leadership of the UCP. So.
Now, would they stop her from speaking on the campaign?
Yeah, no questions about the Freedom Convoy.
Bernier's been arrested for speaking at rallies, so.
Yeah, but not about the content of his speech, though. Just
for speaking.
Just speaking publicly at a COVID ban.
Yeah. Maybe it's an interesting get out of jail free card if she runs. Good luck arresting someone. Who knows?
Who knows? Maybe we'll be in monkeypox lockdown by then, anyways.
Oh, good God. Okay. Well, speaking of more portents of doom, the Battle of Alberta ends. I should say it ends tomorrow.
Could end tomorrow.
It could end tomorrow. We're
You know what? They on Sunday they played absolutely horribly for 2 periods. Tuesday night they played absolutely horribly. They got a very lucky 132-foot slap shot behind Mike Smith, and they tied the game up and then fell again. I think the series is done. I think Sutter's being outcoached, and they've certainly not been able to stop the world's greatest player.
So your playoff beard comes off tomorrow?
So this magnificent thing I've been growing about a month now. Isn't it magnificent?
It's
too great.
Something to behold.
It's something to behold. I fear Friday morning I may have to shave it off.
You young guys, I can grow that in an afternoon.
And let's look at some of those hockey players. They can grow them in an afternoon too.
I'll have to start shaving my armpits again.
Corey, are you going to be able to get on the Edmonton bandwagon if things go poorly tomorrow?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not, and I've never presented myself as being the hardcore hockey fan. I'm the true fair weather one. Hey, I live in the Calgary area. I hope for Calgary. I watch them at the playoff time, root for them somewhat. If they don't make it, I'll be disappointed, but it's not the end of the world. But then again, then my season's done as far as hockey is concerned for me. I hope for the best for them. But from watching last night's game, and even as not a hardcore, fanatical hockey kind of person, I could tell when a team is being terribly dominated, and they're going to have to play dramatically differently if they're going to pull this out of it.
The amount of social media aggravation I've got from some Edmonton fans means I'll be cheering for Colorado.
I don't pretend to be a hardcore hockey fan as well. I'm a football guy. Stamps are on. I'll have season tickets. I'll be there. But once the playoffs start and our team is in, I'm in. But I'm big enough as a man to support the Alberta team that goes on. I know, and that is an indication I'm probably not really a good Flames fan. Is that I have there's any circumstance under which I can cheer for Edmonton, but it's an Alberta team. I just will never. It's just Toronto and Montreal that are off the table for me at all times. So I don't know if Edmonton goes, I can do it. Just it's got to piss people in Toronto off that the only 2 teams in Canada left in it are both from Wild Rose country, and that feels good.
And they have to stay up till 8 or 10:30 at night to watch it.
Terribly late.
Great hockey. Yeah. If Edmonton wins, can I go cover the final series?
We'll talk about it.
Edmonton, Tampa Bay, probably.
We have a reporter in Edmonton.
Yeah, she knows nothing about.
We don't have one in Tampa though.
She's an Oilers fan. She knows nothing about hockey. All right, she can cover the games in Edmonton. I'll go to Tampa Bay.
Hopefully she doesn't watch the show. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for today. Guys, thank you very much for joining us. And thank all of you who have been with us today. Thank you all for your continued support. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandard.news, click on membership. You become a Western Standard member and get unlimited access to all our independent, bailout-free content for only $10 a month or $99 a year. That's it. That's all. Go Flames, go. Thank you very much, and God bless.